Let's start here. Why does the Chinese Communist Party view India as a threat?
Well, it's a pretty straightforward question to answer, actually, because if you look at the trajectory that China has been taking since 1949, that's when the People's Republic of China has come into existence. They've had a very clear-cut goal for themselves. That it's become pretty evident now that when you have President Xi Jinping tell that by 2049 and 2022 they have certain goals. The only country in the region that China actually sees as standing in the way is India. I mean, you could obviously make an argument that there is Japan, there are the ASEAN countries, there's South Korea and so on, but India is a very peculiar case because since 1947, that's when India became independent, and 1949 when the People's Republic of China was formed. China has wanted a unipolar Asia, and the only country that's quite uncomfortable with this position and would like to see a bipolar Asia is India. So in 1947, when India got independence under Prime Minister Nehru, India was sort of seen by the world as this leader of the third world, leader of the post-colonial states. Whereas China always wanted to, under Mao Zedong, wanted to project itself as the leader of the third world. And there are similarities even today. Today, when you look at if you have to ask somebody which is that country that actually leads the global south, I mean, the Chinese would never want to hear India's name there, whereas India clearly sees itself as the leader of the global south. So that is one of the reasons why. I mean, that's the main reason why China sees India in such hostile or antagonistic terms. So yeah, that's the straightforward answer I can give. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure the Chinese Communist Party wasn't too thrilled when the Trump administration began calling it the Indo-Pacific instead of the Asia-Pacific.
That's correct. So if you look at the American foreign policy throughout ever since India became independent, um, at least until the first few years of 1970s, before the United States under President Nixon reached out to China and the whole rapprochement began, India was seen as this bulwark against any sort of Chinese expansionism or Chinese growth or Chinese assertion, if you like to use that term. So even during, if you go back to the Korean War, it was India that actually tried to negotiate a peace between China and the United States. Did not work out too well, but eventually, when the war hit a kind of stalemate, it was the Indian army, which was seen as a neutral observer, to make sure that there's the business of exchanging prisoners and so on was carried out under the auspices of the Indian army. So at every step you see that as and when United States has seen China in this through this hostile lenses, India has emerged as the natural partner for the United States. So under under President Trump, you saw that Washington started to view China in more antagonistic terms, or rather to see China what it was. And once that sort of realization set in Washington, naturally India would I mean, India would have had to play an important role in American strategy in this region, and I think a consequence of that was to sort of rechristen this region called Asia Pacific into Indo Pacific.
Oh, it's interesting you phrase that as see China for what it really was, because for many years, many countries had this kind of rosy view of China and the Chinese Communist Party, and that's changed. A lot of countries now see China and the Communist Party as a threat. But that's nothing new for India. About 60 years ago, India fought a war with China on its borders. What do you think the lessons are from that war?
The 1962 war is an important landmark event, if not just for Indians but for the Americans and the entire world, if they need to learn something about China. And I think the first and foremost lesson that one can learn about China, especially when you go back to this war, is that of the expansionist attitude of China. In fact, I think it would be wrong in the first instance when many people consider the 1962 war to be a border conflict between India and China. There are some facts that actually escape that kind of an analysis. So let me first tell you, in 1949, in 1947, when India became independent, when the British left the subcontinent, India and China were not neighbors, right? They were not neighbors. So you cannot have a border war with two countries that are not neighbors. Quite funnily, there was a prime minister, Indian prime minister in the late 1990s, who said that you can choose your friends but not your neighbors. That was in reference to Pakistan, that you have to deal with the neighbor that you have. But in case of China, we actually had a choice. India could have chosen who the neighbor wanted, who they wanted to see as the neighbor. So in 1949, the People's Republic of China, that is Mao Zedong's the communist forces, they took over Xinjiang. And once Xinjiang was taken, that became the first province to actually share its border with India. But in 1950, when Tibet was taken over, that's when it actually dawned on the Indians that Tibet, which was seen as a buffer state, that ceased to exist now, right? So China, which is not a border state with India, now all of a sudden was your neighbor. Now the question was, what was going to happen? Would the Chinese stop there? Right now, that's where the assessment in India got divided. You had the prime minister who believed in the best. He tried to look at the brighter side of things, and he said that both China and India are we stand for anti-imperialism, and hence we will somehow lead the world towards a peaceful world, and will be the next century will be the Asian century, and India and China together will rule the roost and so on. Whereas there were many others, especially the then Home Minister, the intelligence agencies, and their assessment was that, look, here is a country which has been driven by the communist ideology. They've just taken over Xinjiang. They have now entered Tibet. The Himalayas have ceased to exist. So they are going to expand, right? And this school of thinkers who actually saw China in this expansionist, through this expansionist lens, they were not wrong, because we know today there is sufficient evidence today for us to realize that in 1949 and 1950, once Tibet and Xinjiang were taken over by Beijing, clear instructions were given from Beijing, that is from Mao and Zhou Enlai, to their ambassadors and military leaders, that the time is not yet come for us to lay claim on the regions further, which is to say that at some point they will expand, but the time was just not right.